on each one. Pray, dear Lord, you help all of us to make decisions that benefit the most people in this county. And we covet your help, dear Lord, in all that we do. And we'll forever be mindful to give you the praise. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir. Entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, sir. And I've got a second.
Second.
Yes, sir. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, none opposed. The way we do recognition of the public is when we come to items that people want to discuss, we'll kind of address it then. That way people can hear what goes on beforehand. They can make the most informed opinions and comments. Approval of the minutes, entertain a motion.
So moved.
Yes, sir. Second. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed unanimously. I will defer anything I need to say till later. Mr. Mayor, anything?
I think I'm going to follow suit, Mr. Chairman.
All right, yes, sir. Report of the Finance Director, David, go ahead and start.
Do you want to go ahead and do it or move it to later too? We'll just run it.
Yeah.
Page 9, after everybody turns there. These are our local revenues through January. We're moving on pretty close to budget. Currently, if we re-projected all the revenues, we'd be about 7,700ths of 1% over the projection, so we're really close. Not quite as robust as last year, but everything's still moving along. Does anybody have any questions about any particular revenue or the revenues as a whole? Item 2 is a cash flow analysis for the Highway Public Works Fund. We're still projecting they'll have a positive cash flow. This needs to be sent on to County Commission. This has been requested by
State Auditor.
the State Director of Local Finance if any fund is budgeted with less than 1/12 of their annual appropriations as a cash amount. So,
And this is where we've added the additional penny to them for capital, so it shifted their funds back to keep them in a better positive.
yes, it's in the capital project fund for additional capital.
Thank you, sir.
We do need to send this one on to County Commission.
All right, entertain a motion.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Nipper. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, passed unanimously. And again, as always, anything passed unanimously is assumed to have had its prerequisite 2 readings. All right, go ahead, sir.
Item C is the financial statement memo, just informing all commissioners and any interested parties that the financial statements for the month of January will be on the county's website as of the county commission meeting, and if anybody wants a copy, just let us know. Item D is Ashley's Place, and it was a request by Mr. Witt that we want this to be considered as a civic organization or apply like a civic organization in lieu of a nonprofit because they actually provide a service to the county.
And just for the record, if anybody's not familiar, Ashley's Place conducts the forensic interviews of child sex assault victims. And this is something that, as a county, would have to pay for regardless. It's a function they serve, so it saves us money in the long run. So I move. So I'll see for a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
And we'll let Ashley's Place know where Mr. Witt.
Passed unanimously. Old business. Water provisioning plan. I have not received any requests from anybody besides me and Mo to be on there. We would like a little bit more help than that. So we will bring it up again. Yes, sir. All right. You forgive me. Then Mr. Graves is on there too. We will bring it up again this fall at the February full commission meeting to give everybody one more chance, and then if not, we're going to go forward with.
I'd be happy to.
Okay, good. It'll be at least 4 so far. All right. But again, a reminder: if I forget in the budget report, please remind me, and we'll bring it up to solicit anybody else that wants to do it. And for the Comer Barn, I defer to Ms. DeWitt initially for a presentation. She's been working on some things to try and help us with that to hopefully not cost anything.
Hopefully find our common ground. I suspect a number of you might be here interested in this topic. So I have a couple slides that I think might help explain a little bit more. I'm going to pass out as well a revised resolution. So what's in your packet was, do you want that? You can pass that one that way. And there's some extras if anybody would like it. The resolution that was included in the current packet was the same resolution that passed through this committee and then was tabled when we got to the commission in January. which I think was helpful. It gave us an opportunity to look more carefully at some of the things we would like to accomplish. And so I'll touch on the points of the resolution sort of as I give you some additional background or just summarize where we're at. So I think it's fair to say that many, if not all, would agree that saving the barn is a great thing, so long as it doesn't compete with their area businesses. Chef Christopher still here?
I moved back here.
There you are. I thought I saw you earlier. And so long as it doesn't spend taxpayer money, and that's been a very prevalent request. So I think within this resolution, I think we accomplished a lot of those objectives. So I would say, as you've been hearing and seeing, and I think there's a lot of discussion out there, there's a lot of great ideas of how it could be used. Everything from craft centers to ag centers to farmers markets, places that we could emulate, things like the Build More Stable Cafe, and all these really beautiful, wonderful ideas that are out there, but none of them matter until we figure out how we are going to preserve it and save it. So it is my opinion that it's really going to take a lot of finesse and a lot of expertise and knowledge to pull together all the sources of viable ideas, look at what's been done already, certainly in terms of viability, and gather citizen input on what is practical and probable. My personal interest, I mean, I haven't lived here all that long, so I'm one of those, when you say if you've lived here that long and you have all these Sumner County values, I've only lived here a little over 8 years, but I very quickly became just inspired by the richness of the history in this county. And this is one sliver of it that I feel is really important that we do what we can given the situation in our arrangement with Rogers Group. So I really feel that we need to work through this in a methodical way to develop the best plan. Personally, I would love to see it be a really thriving destination that ultimately pays for itself and inspires donors to give those charitable contributions so that this can be done without the taxpayer money. So I think we can't come up with any of those plans or ideas, though, until we commit to saving it. So I believe that the current deed that's in place, and I know that's a big source of angst and concern, and a lot of those that are here maybe share that concern that the deed isn't favorable to the county. I believe the deed was written in a very intentional way because not only do many of us here in the county, whether residents or commissioners, if you are Rogers Group or anyone, I think everyone is interested in seeing something done with this barn. So the deed is there, and it was written in a way to ensure that something was done at some point, and that if nothing is done by the county, if we don't pick up on the ownership opportunity that we have, then it reverts back to Rogers Group. And that it was written that way so that something ultimately would be done. And I think it's echoing or displaying Rogers Group's opinion on this matter as well, because they really do want to see it preserved. It's not their business, though, and so I feel very comfortable and accepting that their business is the quarry business. Anything related to historic preservation is generally something done at a public-private partnership, and that's the path that I think we're trying to look at going forward. So the idea that we now can, through this resolution, commit ourselves to working on the project, require Rogers Group to amend the deed, as they said they would many, many, many times, but not until that deed is then amended would we actually spend any funding on it. And so that's what the deed is intended to suggest. And then I just found this really cool tool. This is Google Earth, and I just wanted, because there's a lot of details that I've learned now in the recent past few weeks that I think are helpful to understand. So of course, this here is the barn, and that's the deed that we currently have is the barn and the 5 feet around it. The lease that's been talked about quite a bit recently, and you may or may not know, but the lease that is currently between the county and Rogers Group includes this bit of property, and it's the old Comer Mansion where tourism is operating, and then all the property around the barn, which is why there have been events in front of the barn over the last few years on occasion. So it's about 17 acres. I wish you could see this picture better, but just another little interesting tidbit is that, we do think of this as Comer Barn, but Guy Comer, when he built it, he thought of it as Wilson Farms, because it was the Wilson Farms property, and that's the name that's still very clear on the front door of the barn. I want to point out, and this is mentioned in the resolution, just as a point of interest, a lot of people I've heard have sort of fussed that there's, Rogers Group is back there and they're continuing to do their business, and now they're building this big wall of rock. Well, it is very intentional. They have been just recently issued a permit from the city of Hendersonville to build that berm, and then on top of that berm, they are adding a bunch of trees to create a new tree line, a new barrier between their operation and what you see from the roadside. So if you are familiar with their property down Station Camp Boulevard, Big Station Camp, there's a lot of trees that they planted just this past year as they were adjusting some of their operations. And I made the comment that I know they've just planted a lot of trees in the last year, and they said, well, we're planting a whole lot more trees in terms of building this berm and creating that view, or amending what you're seeing right now. So the rocks that you're seeing, just long and short of it, that's a temporary process towards a long-term vision for fixing that. And then just lastly, also reflected in the resolution, I'm just showing you this little box, just for pointing out anybody who's here from media or taking pictures. This is not an architectural drawing. I'm not an expert. I've drawn these parameters as approximate as possible, so please don't take them as fact, but it's to give you an idea of where all this is. If you are looking at the barn from Nashville Pike, directly behind the barn is actually this little building that looks very similar. It's the same kind of stone structure with a green roof. You don't really see it though unless you are back on the property. Rogers Group has suggested that as we go forward, that they would want to work with us if it was in our interest to amend our current lease to allow us to put parking behind the barn rather than in front of it, because they understand the importance of that view and the roadside view that you have of the barn. So they'd be getting a little less money from the farmer that rents all the property behind him to graze his cows, but give us that additional land so that we could put the parking. And I think the last really great point that's captured also in the resolution is that Rogers Group has offered to provide all the gravel and paving for guessing in the vicinity of 400 to 500 parking spaces that would be required, as well as the access road to get to that parking. So I don't really know how to value that, but I'm guessing that's in the $300,000 to $400,000 range as far as a gift in kind. So that's it. That's what I wanted to share.
We can start as a motion for discussion. Obviously, we don't have to necessarily do anything right now, but
Yeah, there is a motion
go
probably.
ahead.
So I'd like to make a motion, the resolution as I've redistributed it today. Hopefully most everybody has had a chance to glance through it as we're talking, but I would like to make the motion that we appropriate up to $250,000 to match the grant that was given to us by the state of Tennessee to start this project. And as it's, I think, very clearly articulated in the resolution, the intent would be to repay that money, to use that money from the hospital funds and repay that money with private donations as we get this whole program moving. And I would say, private donations, they need to know that we're committed to doing it, just like the original deed. They need to know that we are committed to doing that. And that's why passing this resolution and agreeing that we will take the necessary steps.
Second the motion.
Puts it in motion. Thank you.
That opens us for discussion. We'll open it to the floor in just a second, real quick. Is everybody okay when we start on public comment real fast? All right.
Did you want to say something, Luke?
I just have a generalized quick question for you.
You can go first then. Go ahead.
Okay. So where you have proposed the parking lot, inside it is the stable hand house.
So the recommendation from Rogers Group is that we probably don't want to affect the character and the view from the front. So they suggested we should look at putting the parking behind and maybe around that house. But that means, really, this part of it, and the reason that I would not make any recommendation so I think amending the deed is what's being proposed in the resolution, that once we pass this and we commit to the project, that they will amend the deed. They will give us permanent easement access written into the deed, as well as remove the provisions. And that part, let me read that. I passed all of my copies out.
Sure.
But just for the benefit of those that might not have received the copy, this is probably the meat of one important piece here of the resolution. Whereas Rogers Group is supportive of our preservation plans to renovate the barn and is committed to amend the deed to include permanent easement access, meaning, when you right now, if you look at the deed, you'd see like a little white line around just the barn. So they will amend the deed to include the easement access to the barn, and then remove provision 5 of the deed, which states that the property must be quote-unquote renovated to a condition reasonably satisfactory to grantor by not later than 5 years after the date of the recordation of this deed. And there's some associated language within the deed that refers back to that provision. So the thought process as we commit here, they will amend that deed, but we wouldn't ask them, in my opinion, we would not be asking to revise the lease currently, because we need architectural plans. I think we really need to look at it. Would parking really be better served on each side of the barn, or would it be better in the back? Obviously, that little stable hand house, is that what you called it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what was listed on the map.
So, those are all considerations that need to be looked at, but I do believe it is a great gesture on behalf of Rogers Group to offer us to include that additional space, and of course, the point that property wouldn't necessarily be deeded, therefore, the improvements on the property, the lion's share of that expense, Rogers Group is offering to pay for that, so.
All right, before we begin public comments, just to kind of help everybody, we've had public comments on this probably 6 or 7 different times. So I would ask that if you're going to say the same thing you've always said, don't say it. We're only going to hold it to new comments because we're trying to new discussion. So if you're going to tell me that you don't think it should be an event center, I think we've all kind of established that. So you don't have to tell us that one. But if you have an idea of what it might be on, that's fantastic. So, Luke, you want to start?
Oh, that was my only question.
Okay. Go ahead, Kevin.
Kevin Bayer, 424 AB Wade Road. I'm not going to reiterate what I said in the previous full commission meeting, but it seems to me to just be out of sequence that we would propose to spend $500,000 before we have a plan developed. And I mean a cursory plan that a bunch of people could sit down and look at and say, yeah, this all looks good. Okay, now also to Commissioner DeWitt's point, Rogers Brothers, their own words, they are in the business of building communities. You don't believe me, go out Amarillo, Texas, look at a billboard that sits out there. You look at their campaign disclosures, all of their top level people give to the Rogers Brothers PAC, which gives to political people across the United States. They don't do anything without thinking about it, without calculating it. Okay? All I'm saying is this. I don't know how we can go into a deal without having that land more locked up. Down the road, they don't say, well, yeah, you know something, it's now $250,000 a year to lease that land. Some of those things, I think it really needs to be done a little bit differently than we've done in the last several years that I've been watching. Do the diligence up front, and I know, Commissioner DeWitt, you've done some great work. But you were an industrial engineer. Have you ever seen a business get off the ground without a business plan?
And business plans generally cost big money
Actually,
from.
we aren't going to have back and forth discussions.
But not $250,000. So, you wonder why people show up in meetings and are contentious? It's because, and I'm just one, and I'll sit down. But all those people that were here earlier and a lot of these people today, we have a lot of questions that haven't been dutifully answered. And I think it's incumbent on this body. I don't know why it didn't go back to the operations, why it's here. But really, I don't know how you can say to spend $500,000 when you don't really know what you're spending it on. You're going to hire a person? I mean, that's just, I don't know. But thank you.
All right. Anybody else want to be heard on this? Mr. Hinton?
When you were talking about where the money would come from, you named 2 sources and you left one out. And that is the
Tourism revenue.
I can't find it now. It's tourism. Yeah.
Tourism revenue.
Yeah, tourism revenue. So we've always talked about the thing, even drawn out over a long period of time, that tourism would eventually get the money back in this pot. So I think that's the intent. And maybe it's just a hope until we see it come back. But anyway, that's from those 3 sources: private, state, and tourism. And we're borrowing money from the hospital. That's basically the layout. Right?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying.
Anything else, Mr. Hinton?
No.
All right. Anybody else like to be heard on it?
This public comments?
Go ahead, sir. And if you wouldn't mind, just stand up, state your name and your address. The gentleman raised your hand. There you go, you're good.
Darrell Rogers, 128 Old Fountainhead Cemetery Road, Portland. I sent out an email earlier today addressing this very issue. I live on the north end of the county, and I've heard several comments today talking about unconstitutional, things are unconstitutional. Well, I'm going to ask, with me living in the north end of the county, how is my taxation having representation thrown into a barn for a county having an event center? How is that using my tax money for representation of what I'm being represented for in the top of the county? My other part is we heard the word intent. When my forefathers gave to the hospital, I don't think it was their intent for it to be used for a horse barn, which has turned into a for-profit business center for Sumner County government. I'm going to ask you respectfully not to let this go any further. It's the best interest, and I find it confusing that Capstar is the only one that can be a sponsor. I look into Capstar Bank, LA Green's there, several other sponsors throughout the county are there. Wonder why that would be. Could it be that he may have an interest in developing this land later on?
Sir, we'd ask that you
That's a
please-
major
if you
conflict, I
please-
would say.
Sir, we don't allow you to speak ill of other people, commissioners or things like that, and you're kind of
That's a
casting
general
aspersions.
comment, sir.
No, sir, it's
Then I
not.
respectfully ask you to deny this motion from going any further, and please represent the north end of the county with your intent of taxation with representation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, ma'am, I got you.
Campbell, sir, 100 Spade Lake Boulevard, Hendersonville. And I just have a curious question. If we're gonna spend $250,000 to $500,000 for the roofing, where is the money going to come from to renovate the inside? Because it needs the electric, it needs high back, it needs new doors, new windows, new stalls removed. Where's all this going to come from?
Yes, ma'am. Any other comments? Yes, sir, go ahead. State
Scott
your name.
Ross, 208 Harris Lane. I'm a professional event producer, and if this is intended to ever be an event center, there's a whole lot that goes into that.
Yes, sir, we've exhausted that portion of the conversation. If you have something else, please add to
Event
that.
center in Westmoreland.
What
50,000.
department would be managing the facility?
Question.
We try to do questions and answers, but it's been stated at some point tourism, so I.
So this would be under the tourism?
At some point, yes, sir.
Okay.
All right. Commissioner Taylor? Go ahead, Mo.
Yeah. You asked that this stuff not be addressed, that's been addressed already. But if you're not getting your questions addressed to your satisfaction, I asked at our last commission meeting that a deed be in front of me before I was asked to sign off on money. That's still not happening. And now we're doubling the potential, which opens Pandora's box on the potential that could be spent in the future. There's only $8.something million left in the hospital fund. So are we gonna drain that for a barn when I got people that don't have water?
All right, that concludes, oh, go ahead, Jeremy.
Chris, I think this gentleman back here has his hand.
Oh, is it, okay, yes, you go ahead. All right. If you would, sir, state your name and address and go
My
right.
name's Brad Plumley. I live at 685 Oak Hollow Road. I guess what I have to ask is, okay, you've got funding from the state, and you're gonna pull from the hospital fund, but you say you're gonna pay it back with donations. I have to ask, who is going to, have you secured those donations? Or secured who's going to donate? If you haven't secured who's gonna donate, who's gonna donate to something that is not set in stone? In other words, the agreement that you have on that barn is not a real solid thing to base things off of. So, if you can get the donations to cover that, that's one thing. But you've got to have the foundation to set it on. And the agreement that we have is not a foundation at all. I would say that you really need to look at renegotiating before you move forward with anything.
All right. Go ahead, Chef Christopher.
I'm not gonna talk about event center. Question. Chris Newton, 1072 Paddock Point Circle. Let me get that out of the way. You're gonna build something and you don't know what you're gonna do with it. So let's build something and then we'll figure out later. So let's say you put walls, whatever you put in there. Well, let's say you decided to make it a real estate office. I know you won't do that, but that means, well, we need these wires over here, so these walls gotta come down. These windows don't work. So you're building something that you don't know what's gonna be. So how does that even happen? How do you build something you don't know what it's gonna be? So I know we've already spent $10,000, $20,000 on people coming in and giving us their advice on, I have no idea, what it was we spent to look at it and give us recommendations what to do with it. That's when the event center first came up, was the guy who recommended that. From Nashville, we paid some company, what, $10,000, $12,000, whatever it was. So we've already blown that away, and that, we don't even look at that anymore, because that makes no sense. So let's go ahead and throw some more money on it, but something we have no idea what we're doing. Do you have any idea what we're doing with it? Any suggestions, ideas? I know you do. But y'all need to, a few things y'all need to figure out whether we get the property or not. Before you build something, I mean, I wouldn't build a house if I didn't own the property, and I didn't know, like, really get the property. Then what kind of house am I building? Well, let's just put a roof up, then we'll decide what kind of house we're having, what kind of business. Y'all need to think about this in the long run, guys. You know, I mean, you'll throw some money at something that you might have to tear all this stuff down because it won't work for what you want it for. You know, if I did that at Epic, I'll build it, and then I'll decide what I want to do with it. I'll just be throwing money at stuff. That's what y'all doing. Y'all throwing money at something, you have no idea what you're going to do with it. If anybody can tell me what to do with it, anybody? Nobody knows. Nobody in this whole county knows. Not one person in this whole county has said what they're going to do with this building. But yet you're going to spend tons and tons of money on something you have no idea. It's like a ghost thing over here.
Sir. Thank you. All right, that concludes. All right, go ahead, Jeremy.
I'll let you go first.
So, I had a chance to talk with Commissioner DeWitt, and very good conversation. We obviously disagree on how to proceed on this. It just, you know, it is worth repeating and burying that we don't need a resolution to renegotiate contracts. You know, the county mayor, you got this deed and contract without permission from the county commission. So
Okay, again, Jeremy, if you're gonna start to make accusations or do things like that, we're not.
it's not an accusation; it's a fact. I mean, it's a fact. I'm
That's
asking.
within the scope of his job.
Correct. So the scope of his
Again,
job.
I'm not gonna argue with you. If you're gonna make comments that are derogatory about other people or
It is
officers,
not a
we're not gonna do
derogatory
that.
comment.
So.
It is a factual statement. So as we were discussing last night, my opinion is this needs to be renegotiated by the county executive, then brought back forward to us before we ever even think about doing it, because you don't need a resolution to do all this stuff. It is definitely getting the cart before the horse and committing county resources to something that, you know, half the county doesn't want to do, or half the county are emotionally tied to something because it's an old horse barn, but then they, you know, realize when you see the deed and lease restrictions, everybody's against it. There's nobody who wants to do this. So I'm adamantly opposed to spending any type of money, even state money, our money, hospital fund money, tourism money, on a deal that we don't have the rights to, and to say, hey, let's commit this money, and then you know, good spirit, somebody's going to come negotiate it. That's just not how you do negotiations. I mean, that's I just disagree with this vehemently, and do not support this plan. And talk to you in 2 weeks about it.
All right, who did I miss back there?
Me.
Go ahead, Ruth. Go ahead, Ruth.
For better or for worse, Ruth.
You're fine, go ahead, Ruth.
Okay, so Ruth Fennell, 1049 Blue Jay Way, Gallatin, Tennessee. Chris, I guess, you know, I've spoken before to this group. I've spoken in many things. You know how I feel about this. You know how I feel about spending money when there is no plan, when we've had 2 tax increases in the last 5 years. What I am concerned about tonight, just from what I'm seeing, is that it doesn't matter. This is giving the appearance. Now, you may feel this differently, but the appearance is it doesn't matter what people say, how many people show up, what their concerns are. It is damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. We're gonna do this thing regardless of what it costs, regardless of what we're doing it for. And I would caution you from the depths of my heart to really look inside when we have people who don't have water in this county. When we have people who, kids need food at schools and things like that. I mean, we're spending money for lots that we have no clue what we're doing for. We're spending money for a barn that we have no true ownership on. I'm asking this group to truly, in your heart, look at what you're doing. This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy to do this at this time when we have so many other pressing issues. And if you move forward on this, it gives the appearance to people watching that you don't give a rat's patootie about what a lot of people who are engaged think. It is that there has been a commitment somewhere along the process that's going to be kept regardless of cost, regardless of timing, regardless of purpose or outcome. And I respectfully would caution you to seriously question, why is this being shoved through now? Why is this so critical to do this now, today, at this exact moment in time? Because it does not have to be done now. Take the time to make a plan, have town halls, have conversations, look for the private donors, the private funding, come to the public with a tangible, solid, concrete plan, and if it's good, people will support it. But right now, what you're doing is showing a complete disrespect for people who have very valid concerns. And I would ask you to stop and take a breath and do what needs to be done in being respectful of taxpayer dollars. Thank you, Chris.
All right. Luke, I'm sorry, Mr. Graves, then Luke, I'll get you last.
Well, I'm just gonna sit here, if y'all don't mind. I just believe it's a bad idea by not going ahead and doing your due diligence first. Because we got a lot of things going on. We got schools, we got roads, we got EMS, sheriff, courthouse, jailhouse. I mean, you go on and on. Money we gotta spend. We got over $400 million. Our running, our budget's probably as close to $400 million a year tonight. I know it's not in dollars, but we keep adding during the middle of the year, doing these projects in the middle of the year. And I'm not against the barn. I mean, I grew up around that barn. I hauled hay and put hay in that barn. I bet there ain't nobody in this room hauled hay and put it in that barn. Of course, I'm a little bit older than most of you, but most of you.
Yeah, that's right.
But I just feel strong if we don't do our due diligence. Nobody has mentioned nothing about the city of Gallatin. They own 800 foot. They annexed 800 feet down in front of that barn. That barn's about 500 or 600 foot from the road. So nobody's said nothing. Nobody's talked to the city of Gallatin. The reason I know, I went up there and talked to them. Nobody's talked to the fire marshal. What are we going to do if we're going to put it back to that point? I don't expect no answers, but I would like you to think about that, about what we're doing here. And I'm going to say again that I believe in process it's a good idea, but I disagree with going ahead and spending. I know you're going to have some money. There's no clarification on, as far as I know, on the grant that comes from the state officially. Are we giving a dollar for a dollar, or we're going to have to do that $500,000 to be able to use that $250,000? I don't know. I hadn't heard nobody answer that question. There's a lot of questions that's not. Has anybody on this committee or the commission, I went to talk to City of Gallatin about it, curiosity. I don't know if anybody on the committee or the county mayor or anybody has talked to me. I got some things that they told me that's gonna have to come in front of them before this process goes any further. You got stormwater issues. That's just a thing out there. We know we do now. But I would appreciate if you would just defer it. You can go back. I know you can study something all day, but talk to somebody. Has anybody talked to Roger Group? I know it's public comments. I'd like to know that answer.
We will address this as soon as you're done talking, Mr. Gross.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. All right, Luke, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. I'm hearing a lot of discussion and from us and from the public and from Leader Lamberth and everybody who I've talked to about this subject of there's not a plan. Is there an ability for us to form an ad hoc of commissioners and maybe some members of the Gallatin Council and maybe some constituents and see if we can come up with a plan before we start, complaining this to death without doing something about it?
All right, I'll open the discussion before we get to anything. A couple things real quick. I've got commissioners in line. What we've said from the beginning, and Ruth, in your point, we have changed a lot of what we said. We backed off of what the purpose is. And the reason I say that is if you've gone out to the barn and you've seen it within the past 2-3 months, you'll realize how bad it is right now. The only pressing issue we have is that grant is by March, is what they put on there initially.
That's not true. That's false.
That's what we initially were told on that. So we still have to get clarification, Mr. Long's got it, on how much we have to actually spend. And that's a contention about, do we spend $1 to activate 250,000? Do we, and so that's the only reason we've said that there's a timeline, if there's any kind of timeline, what kind of got things going, why it keeps coming up. So to explain to people on that. What we've said as far as budget and talking with Michelle in general offices, if we don't put a roof over it, everybody's in agreement it has to have a roof, otherwise it's going to collapse. It may collapse within the year, it may collapse in 2 years, but everybody does agree it's going to collapse sooner or later. So what we've said was, we wanted to initiate the activation of the state grant to be able to get someone to bid out the roof. And so that we had someone on the site that would do it. And then we could have a million town hall meetings if we want to afterwards to decide how we're going to use it. And I don't think that's a terrible idea by any stretch of the imagination. We're not really constrained as far as how soon we have to come up with what we're going to do with it. The only thing we have to do is we've got to put a roof on it. Because once the roof is done, then the structure itself is done, and then we don't have it anymore, and it's gone. It does revert back to Rogers Group, my understanding is that. So I'll defer to Mr. Long first, because he had a question as far as activating it.
Before we go forward, I had one question that would be for Ms. Dennon. She needs to determine if this requires state approval, because generally if this is considered a loan, it will require state approval. So I asked before we disperse any funds.
For the money coming from.
That we determine that, and if it requires state approval, that it is obtained.
And we'll have to find out.
Because my feeling is right now that it does.
And the reason what that, for everybody's purpose, you cannot loan yourself as a county government money. You can't loan yourself some money and then expect them to pay it back. So if we said, okay, it's a contract between us and the tourism board, that's something you can do. That would put the tourism board on hook then for any money. So we just have to define it with the state, because that's one, oddly enough, the state's not crazy about it if you try and circumvent their loan rule either. So again, these are all clarifications we have to get. We bring it up today because at some point we've got to start moving down, like we said, to put a roof on there. And just so everybody understands, that's our only goal right now. At least my understanding, and in talking with general offices, to put a roof on it so that we can keep it around, and then we can take as long as we want to decide what we're going to do with it, how we're going to do with it. And the Rogers Group is very comfortable. Ms. DeWitt has spoken with them, and that's where they come up and said, hey, we'll give you the money, we'll help provide materials for the paving and some other things. And they've also been very, very upfront about the fact that if we have any kind of plan, and by that plan, they mean we spend some money and put a roof on it, where we show some kind of due diligence that we're going to take care of it, then they're willing to amend the deed at that point. I agree. There's a lot of people that like to see the deed done first. I think it's a chicken and the egg kind of thing. They want to see a roof. And so I don't think we necessarily have to build a roof, but we have to have a plan to build a roof. So that's kind of where we're at. I'll now defer to the rest of the commission, our committee. I'll just kind of go around Mr. Gamenon first, Mr. Good, and Mr. Foster. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's been questions, is there a plan? Well, there is a plan, and the plan is to stabilize it to keep it from falling down. And it is getting in very poor condition. And then there was several other comments. One thing, there's seems like always a mistrust to Rogers Group or whatever, but I've been on tourism, Sumner County Tourism, for 9 years now. And for at least 8 years of that, we've had a contract with Rogers Group, and we've had a lease on that 13 acres, plus the Comer House is where Sumner County Tourism is housed. And it is a great place. And what is Sumner County Tourism? Sumner County Tourism brings in hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, to this county. The state of Tennessee says every dollar that's spent on tourism has a return of $19 to your community and to your county. And when it says tourism will fund some of this stuff or all of whatever we do, that's not local taxpayers' dollars. That's hotel motel tax. That's how tourism is funded, which is from visitors. And the county needs desperately, we really do. What we're going to do with this barn, I don't know exactly what we're going to do, but we do need another attraction in this county. Wilson County has the state fair, or the county fair, that brings in thousands and thousands of people. But anyway, that is one idea. The gentleman lives on the north end of the county. I live on about as far north, 3 or 4 more steps, and I'm in Kentucky. But this is not just something for people that live between Gallatin and Hendersonville. It's something that the whole county could be proud of and glad that we've got. Just like if we give money, well, we've got the Douglas Clark House. That's not close to my house, but I'm glad we've got it. And even tourism itself. But anyway, back to what I was thinking. Our agreement with Rogers Group, with the house, if it needed a roof, Rogers Group paid for the roof. And I think it's, what, $100 a year? Is that what it is for a lease for the house and all the property, the 13 acres? And there has been events on the property. What kind of events? I don't know. Some kind of I think, outdoor events, a couple of them that Hendersonville Chamber of Commerce has had.
Farm to table.
But if the house needed a roof, Rogers Group paid for it, like $20,000 or $30,000. If it needed painting, Rogers Group paid for it. If it needed a heating and air unit fixed or repaired, or the septic system repaired, then tourism paid for it. We done the maintenance on it, but Rogers Group has always stepped up and done any major work that's been done on it. So I do trust them to do what they say they will do. That's one thing. And also, we hear all the time, half the people in this county don't want it. I don't believe that one bit, because I've been on the radio once a month at least, and it's been put in the newspaper. And by the way, this started 5 years ago. This didn't start, and there's been a plan for 5 years. There's been, tourism spent $20,000 on a plan 5 years ago. And there's been all kinds of work done on this, but what happened to it? It got caught up in political football is what happened to it, and got tossed back and forth and back and forth. And at one point we just said, just forget it. But anyway, I have mentioned this on the radio when I've been on the radio. Maybe nobody don't listen, I don't know. Can't really tell. But for at least another year now, just about every time that I've been on the radio, and like I said, it's been in the paper, and that's the Portland radio station, by the way, and I've had 2 emails from people that live in my district that said they didn't want us to do it, and the rest of the people that I have talked to, and I've talked to hundreds of people, said, please don't let that barn fall down. And the people in Portland are acute to it, and why are they? Because in 1975 or so, we had a really nice depot, and we let them tear that down, and there's not a week that goes by. How long's that been? Almost 50 years now. Somebody says, I wish we hadn't tore the depot down. What is this barn? It's nothing really but a historic icon. It's a symbol of Sumner County. And if you'll read your history of Sumner County, before the Depression or during the Depression, if it had not been for the Depression, there wouldn't have been a Lexington, Kentucky. That would have been right here in Sumner County. Anyway, I want to, and we've already had an ad hoc committee also. And by the way, I went to, I inspected a house in Bethpage the other day. And this gentleman, a really nice house, and I talked to him about it. When I go out in the county, I'll talk to people and I'll ask them, what do you think about this? And I ain't found one yet that's told me that we should let it fall down.
Tell them the deed.
I'm sorry?
Do you give them the details of the deed and what we're doing? I mean, are you just
Stop,
saying?
guys, we're doing general discussion.
Yeah, you had your turn. It's my turn now. But anyway, this one particular person, he said, if y'all are not going to save the barn, he said, if they'll let me have it, I'll come and tear it down and bring it and put it on my 30-acre farm in Bethpage. That was one comment that I got.
Okay, we go real quick.
And
sorry,
one
go
other
ahead.
comment.
Go ahead.
I have a question. How many grants has Sumner County received from the state of Tennessee that we did not even ask for? Because we did not even ask for this grant for the Comer barn, did we, Mr. Holt? Senator Hale just called one day and said the state has granted you $250,000 to help save that barn. And I'm
Correct
thank you.
appropriation.
And, but, I'm sorry, one more thing. It's time to quit kicking this down the road. If we're going to do it, let's do it. And if we're not going to do it, just let it fall down and forget it. But it's time. We've beat this horse to death. Thank
Before
you.
we move on to Mr. Good, I've talked to Ms. Denham and Mr. Law, and regardless, before we can move forward on anything, we still need to establish with the state how much we have to spend to use their money. And then we also need to establish with the state what the wording needs to be able to take money from the hospital fund that's going to be reimbursed at some point through private donations. I've got Mr. Good and Mr. Foster in the queue for next. That's fine, but I was just going to tell everybody, regardless, we're not going to be able to vote on anything today because we're going to need to get a firm answer on those two things really before we can move forward, even with just the idea of bidding it out for a contractor. So that was something we had hoped to do, but we're not going to be able to. Mr. Good, if you'd like to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make a couple clarifications, but now that you've just mentioned that, and we're basically going to table it, I'll cut them by 90%. A couple things that's been mentioned, and one of the gentlemen mentioned about geographically where people live and so forth. The state constitution set up how many commissioners we got and why it was set up, and it was a little bit different 200 years ago. So we represent the entire county. Since I've been here, we put $100,000 in Westmoreland for the mule barn, strictly for tourism for there. The people I live, how much was it?
It was an expo center, it wasn't just a mule barn.
Okay, but for tourism, for Westmoreland, we put money in that Westmoreland. We put money into, and I say this to say, for the commissioners that were here, which is about 3 in the room, including Mr. Holt, people that I represent in Hendersonville, we heard a lot about all the money we put into water, into White House, Bethpage, and Westmoreland grants. I don't care. I gladly voted on them every time. We still have money that the utility people have not used because, as it's been mentioned here, it's stupid in this day and time that people don't have water. And that's one thing we've been working on since I've been here.
Yes, we give them one time this year.
It was mentioned, the Clark House was mentioned. We put money into Portland Airport, this county commission did, and it was a unanimous vote. The Gallatin Airport. It's been mentioned that you don't do due diligence, that we're basically avoiding doing due diligence on the front end. For those, and a lot of y'all know, and I remember this looking around the room, but we had to do an unbelievable study to decide, have professionals tell us what to do with the courthouse. So my understanding with this resolution, which we're not going to vote on tonight anyway, is, and I use that as an example, which we had to do with the airport and the airport grants, that was unanimous voted on for Gallatin. We did it for Millersville Library. 99%, and I guarantee you, the law director will correct me if I'm wrong, 99% of monies that I voted on had nothing to do with my district. But it was the right thing for Sumner County, and it helped Sumner County. I mentioned the Millersville Airport. It was mentioned that we don't spend money to do studies on the front end. And again, I use JPA as an example at the courthouse. Hendersonville spent tens of hundreds of thousands of dollars about 40 years ago of how to take Broadway all the way down to Creekwood. They did the study to find out it was going to cost a lot more than they could do it. They did away with it, but they had to do the due diligence on the front end. That's still at the city, at City Hall in Hendersonville. They also did a Midtown study where H.G. Hills was. That entire town was going to be changed for a study that paid tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars for to find out, doing the smart due diligence on the front end, it wasn't going to be make sense at the time. We've been hearing that no one's for it. I'm like my commissioner friend from Portland here, Mr. Bagsby Ranch. Every time he's been here, he said, don't compete with me, but yes, please fix the barn. At least make it this piece of history we have in here. So I just want to get clear that we as a 10th District Commissioner in Hendersonville, I know for a fact when I say this, and I can look it up and prove it, that 99% of the votes I've done on grants, which I don't think of any grant, and I'm looking at Mr. Taylor, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Graves, I don't think we've turned down one grant when they say, here, we ought to put more water in the county and do stuff. We've always said, let's match that grant. No matter what we did, let's match that grant. So we have an unbelievable opportunity here to just do the due diligence like we've always done, and to see what we can do. One last thing. Somebody mentioned you would never go buy a house, and I'm in real estate. You would never go buy a piece of property without doing due diligence and not knowing what it was going to cost. Exactly. You're going to go look at that piece of property, walk through it 10 times, and you're going to buy it contingent upon a home inspection, contingent upon appraising, and with a million contingencies, doing the due diligence. So, Mr. Chairman, based on what you said, I went 5 miles further than I want, but I want people to know that we do our due diligence, and this has been a 5-year project, and so anyway, that's it.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Foster?
No, I can't add anything to the eloquent statements of the previous two commissioners.
Sounds good. Mr. Nipper, you're the only person I haven't called yet.
I echo Commissioner Foster's statement.
All right. With that in mind, Ms. DeWitt, did you still want to?
Well, I just want to make sure that we're exploring our options. So the way the resolution is written is that we would be using money from the hospital fund, with those funds to be recovered from private donations and tourism resources, which is stated as a loan. Instead of saying that we were using money from the hospital fund, could we say that we're using money that is hotel motel tax, which is not our Sumner County resident tax, and directly access that, use the money that we are collecting this year over and above what we allocate to tourism as a non-taxpayer revenue source that we could allocate towards this resolution. Does that make sense?
What you do?
But it wouldn't be a loan, it's just using.
You're just saying we would just take that.
Use the overage of what comes in through hotel motel tax that is not allocated to tourism.
But what you're doing is you're directing it to be paid back to the hospital fund.
No, I think we were saying that rather than accessing the hospital fund with a loan scenario.
Okay,
we just directly allocate the hotel tax.
The only problem with that would be that we still don't, and I think an important part of it is that we have something specifically that states whatever money's spent is going to be put back. And regardless of how we state that, it's going to be viewed as a loan by the state. And I think unless we have an outside funding source that suddenly shows up that would allow us to activate the state money. You know, if there was a donor that decided to donate $10,000 and that's what it was required to start the state money, that'd be something different.
I think it would just be obtaining their approval, which we can start checking.
We started going through the channels of doing that. I'm just not sure what this is so odd that
it is.
So obviously there's one final scenario, which would be that we don't intend to repay it, that we have been given a grant from the state for $250 and the county will spend $250 out of the hospital fund, and all remaining funding necessary to restore the barn to whatever design and decision we have going forward, that all of that money would come from private donations, that we would not spend more than $250, but we would allocate that without the expectation that we repay it. And that would just be one other scenario that, in the spirit of the grant we received from the state, I believe that really would be the right thing for the county to do, to access that hospital fund for that amount of money.
Are you amending your original motion for that?
I'm thinking about it.
The other issue is the timing of the actual grant. I was looking at it with Miss Ark. There's actually some language in here about having a plan and making a report by March 1st. It doesn't say spent by March 1st, but it says a report, and it speaks, looks like you have to tell me intent.
It could be a letter just saying we intend to preserve the Comer Barn. That could be, it's not a in-depth report. They just require you to put it on letterhead and send it.
Maybe as simple as approving it, and then, because you're gonna have if you approve the resolution, then we can start the channel to see what needs to be done for the loan before the commission meeting, because it's 2 weeks out.
Mr. Mayor?
See what we have
Well,
to do.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman of the Budget Committee. Let me say this. This is something that we've looked at a long time. Didn't come up overnight. This is something that has been in play for several years, over 5 years actually. But I don't know. Maybe Mr. Good mentioned this, but it's my 30th year of public service, and I'm proud of that. And I hope I've done some things right. I know I've made mistakes, and I think we're all human and we make mistakes. But I think your intent tonight is just to try to find a way to preserve what's near and dear to us in Sumner County, and that's our history, and that's what makes us special. And that's what Davidson County, that actually created 3 years before Sumner County, and we were created 10 years before the state of Tennessee. We were part of North Carolina. Has not done a good job to retain. They've torn down most of their historic structures. They have a few left. But I'm very proud of what we've done in Sumner County. We have our historic Lip Park. We have Craigmont. We have Wynwood. We've preserved the Douglas Clark House. It was our original courthouse from 1786. We've preserved the Bridal House. We've done a lot of great things, and I think what's at stake tonight is the preservation of this historic, iconic structure. Even if we do nothing but match this grant, because that's what it's going to take to get a roof on. Match this grant, put a roof on the barn. I think it's been made evidently clear through our commissioner here, Mr. Witt, that I highly respect, that if we pass a resolution funding it before any work's done, Rogers Group will take any reversionary clause, and you nod your head if I'm right, out of that deed. If we only did that, and we just let the barn stay there for some future county commission to make a decision of the use, I'm fine with that. But I'm pleading with you, while we have got an opportunity to preserve an important part of our history. And let me say this, I love Shep Christopher. I don't know, are you still here? He's got a great event center, and I don't want to put him out of business because he's my friend. But let me also say that we spend money and we capture it from Hendersonville and Gallatin and other places in the county to do work for people like water lines at the upper end of the county that doesn't benefit any of the people who live in Hendersonville or Gallatin or inside the city limits of Portland. But we do it because there's a need, and that's important. And we've gone through a grant process, and we've put more water lines in the last 10 years that's been done in the last 60 years, and we're going to continue to do that with your help. And we're applying, my grant writer, for CDBG grants as quickly as we can. We have to wrap up work on one project to go for the next. I am pleading with you see the vision in preserving this structure for generations to come, because I, for one, don't want it said that I didn't do everything in my power to try to preserve that, because once it's gone, like Mr. Gamenden said, it's gone forever, and you can never recreate it because it's not the same. And if we're having to take it out of the hospital fund, and that was its sole purpose, was economic development when it was passed, not to do any other thing. If you'll look at it, when that money was accepted, I don't know if you were here then, Billy, but it was titled for, you were here, Paul, for economic development. And we have rarely done that. And so I'm pleading with you to take that $250,000 out, match this grant, preserve this building for generations to come. And if we never, in this next 3 years as a commission, decide what to do with that, I'm good with that. Because it'll be a county facility that's maintained for generations to come, and somebody else can determine what the use of that is. I'm fine with that too. But to let it fall down is all on our heads. And I promise you, the people I've talked to, yeah, there's people who oppose anything. But you can look at social media, you can look at anything, any people that I talk to, the vast majority of the people in this county want that building preserved. And I'm going to shut up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Mr. Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you say again what the absolute deadline is for us to apply for the grant or make sure that we have that grant?
Yeah, if I understand correctly, Ms. Denman, Mr. Long, correct, what we need to do to make sure that we activate certain things is we need to send a letter to the state saying we have the intention of spending the $250,000 to redo the roof on the structure. That has to be sent by March 1st. We also, at some point, have to talk with the state to figure out exactly how we can take money from the hospital fund if our intention is for it to be repaid back with private funds later, which is their approval for that. That's really all we have to do right off the bat. With that being said,
Talk with Gallatin, maybe.
yeah, and
Now, I'd like to make an amendment.
Go ahead.
So, personally, I believe this is actually an improvement from the resolution I even brought you today. I really do believe this is the right thing to do from the beginning. I am a peacemaker and a consensus builder. I'd like to keep everybody happy. So the idea that if we can raise what it might take to fully restore that barn, if we could raise $3 million to do it, then why not just raise an extra $250 and keep everybody happy and say we're not going to spend any taxpayer money? So that was the heart of what went into the resolution as it's presented. But I think this is better. So I would like to amend my prior resolution to say that in the first therefore be it resolved, this body does hereby appropriate up to $250,000 as matching monies from the hospital fund to the Comer Barn Preservation Project, and be it further resolved that any cost over this $250,000 contribution shall be funded with private donations and tourism resources. So that will be my motion. And I'm sure that will create some further debate.
A motion and a second on the floor. Do we have any amendments to start with? I would offer an amendment that we don't put any matching money in right now. What we simply state is that per your resolution, we would send a letter to the state asking that they let us spend the $250,000 for the roof. And that if they come back with how much money we need to have on our own, at that point it could be appropriated when it's decided, when the state lets us know what it is. But in the interim, that we approve the resolution with the idea that we're moving forward, asking to actually use the $250,000 from the state. And then when they get back with us, say yes or no, how much you have to spend, we could evaluate it at that point.
I was thinking that,
gets
Mr.
it
Chairman.
moving and.
I was thinking that, because that makes the most sense to me, that to cement the commitment from the state for the $250,000. If all we have to do is get a letter and say that we're going to proceed with some type of funding, we absolutely need to make sure that we get that done.
Let me say one thing, Mr. Chairman, and I don't have a problem with that, but if you look at the language of that direct appropriation, it says that money is to be spent to make improvements to the facility. The problem with that is you have no money to have a game plan to make improvements. Under state law, any expenditure over $50,000 requires that you hire a professional engineer. And I don't believe that that money can be spent in that way, because it has to be spent for improvements. That is the problem with your resolution. And so, that's fine. We could, if you accepted the money, I could go out and spend the money tomorrow. But that would be very dangerous, because first, you'd be going against state statute. Second of all, the roof, since it's bad repair, it needs structural repairs. You know what I'm saying? Not just put a roof on top of it, if you've ever been out there.
Could we,
So that's an issue, and I wanted to make you aware of that.
then, so that we're within the legal realm of everything, what if we include appropriating up to $50,000 with the idea that we still have to get the answers from the state? Mind you, this is not money that we have to spend tomorrow or the next day, but we've started the process to activate the state money. We're within the statute as far as saying what we're gonna do.
When I say, Mr. Chairman, when I say $50,000, I'm talking about, I don't know what an engineer will cost.
Oh, no, I know,
But-
Mr. Earl.
but-
we're putting a number there because we have to put a number there.
Right, but I'm
just to get it
saying,
started.
I'm if an engineer is gonna cost you $100,000, if the improvement, if you do work, construction work on the building, anything over $50,000, you correct me if I'm wrong, Madam Attorney, you have to hire a professional engineer.
Or
I don't know
architect,
what
or
they.
architect.
Or architect, I don't know what they will charge. And so saying 50 is cutting it pretty darn close.
The only reason I'm saying 50, we can say $1. We
Would you
can say
put the
whatever number. It's just-
contingencies on Ms. DeWitt's motion?
Yeah, it does two things. One, it moves it on to the full commission. Hopefully, we'll have some answers from the state and on both issues by the time we go to the full commission, because it's not next week. It's following due to a holiday. And then also, we may have some firmer answers on who's gonna, what organization is willing to step up and say, we'll be in charge of fundraising. Because that's a big question too that we kind of alluded to, but we're just trying to move forward. I don't think there's any way, again, it goes back to chicken and egg, that we can give all of our answers and that everybody's gonna be happy with them. At some point, as we've said numerous times, we've got to just do something. I would make the motion that we do something, take it to the full commission, hopefully with even more clarity in 2 weeks, so that way we'll have a better idea.
Thank you, sir.
We're actually not doing any more Mr. Comments, Mr. Graves.
This is
We've
not
just
a
gotta-
comment, this is a
No, sir.
question.
We're good, we will just say, we've got to finish this vote though, sir. I owe it to the.
It's about this vote. I'm a county commissioner, if you didn't forget. Again.
Mr. Graves, I don't have to say, we're not doing questions right now, so we're getting ready to call a vote. I'm sorry, that's how each committee works. If I showed up to
I
your
don't think
committee.
so,
we
Mr.
wouldn't-
Chairman.
It actually does, sir.
Who's it?
Does
I'd like
anybody
to-
else have any more
I'd like to
discussion?
ask the county, point of order, and I'd like to ask the county attorney about that.
I mean, I think he's ready to take the vote. He can do that, Mr. Graves. He can say he's gonna call off comment.
Mr. Graves, if you got a quick question, go ahead.
I just want to, I asked the finance director, is there a way to take the money from tourism? Do they have it in their budget to take some money out of tourism to do this?
It's still got, that's the problem, is it goes back to the loan, no matter how, that's what Mr. Wood was saying, no matter how we answer, it's gonna be a loan. Because if we have an intention of at some point putting that back with private funding, then it's a loan.
We generally, at the first of the year approving budget, we're concerned about getting the budget time because the tourism doesn't have a very substantial reserve.
I mean, you can't
It's
take
pretty
money away
small.
from them.
If you did, I don't think they would continue to operate without layoffs or something of that nature.
I know where you're going. We kind of kicked that one around too, Mr. Graves, but it won't work.
We can send you a copy of their application from last year, and you can kind of see their cash flows. I'll have Ms.
Thank
Allison
you,
do
Mr.
that.
Chairman, I don't appreciate what you just done.
We'll send that to you, Mr. Graves, way you can see what they do.
We all have our different opinions, sir.
That ain't the difference,
With
Mr.
that being
Chairman.
said, anybody else got any comments before we vote?
What are we voting on exactly?
We are voting on a resolution that will send a letter to the state asking them to activate the $250,000 that will appropriate up to $50,000 out of the hospital fund if that's what's needed to trigger it. Having gotten an answer hopefully in 2 weeks from the state on both issues. but it's just simply to send to the full commission.
Does this kill Mr. Witt's motion? Or
He's
is
just
it-
amended it to say that rather than.
It
as I
still has everything
articulated-
in there about the deed and everything else.
Yeah.
We haven't done anything. We don't want to do what.
Just amending the amount to say, we'll start with
$50,000, and in the meantime, between now and then, and this part
Okay.
really doesn't need to be part of the resolution, we'll try to get the state to give us some more firm.
Now, let me just understand, so I can clearly understand. You're asking for a direct withdrawal from the hospital fund of 50,000.
Correct.
But then you're gonna go to the state and ask if you can borrow up to 250,000.
No, can we spend the 250 direct?
No, you're gonna borrow 250,000 and then pay it back. Is that
No,
what you're?
no, he's not
No.
talking about the loan anymore.
We're just wanting to
Trying to
activate the
access the grant.
$250,000 grant.
Let me.
Trying to confirm with the state what it takes to activate the 250,000, because there's been different.
Mr.
input.
Chairman, is that going to allow Ms. Art to report to the state what the plan is by March 1st for the commission for the barn? That's my concern.
Pending our
the
approval of
resolution
the
passes,
resolution in
yes.
2 weeks
So
from now.
you're
Yeah,
planning.
it'll be up to the full, actually, David, it'll be up to the full commission that day.
So we're planning that day to spend 300, what the plan is.
Mr. Chairman, I thought you, on order, thought you called for the vote.
Well,
You still discussing?
well, actually, I said if we had any open discussion. Your question actually got a little bit going. All right, do we have any other further discussion?
Yes.
Jeremy, is that on the,
Just a clarification on what's been stated as far as the grant. So I've spoken with the Director of Legislation and Finance and Administration, spoken with our Senator's office and our 44th Representative's office. The March 1st deadline is only for non-governmental entities, that of which we are not, and the Legislative Director for FNA has confirmed that. Sumner County is not under that provision. We do not have to do anything by March the 1st. We don't report anything by March the 1st. All we have to do is by July the 1st of every year is to state our intent. And Senator Hale's office has confirmed that all we have to do, they understand these things can take 2 or 3 years. There's no reporting we have to do now. There's no voting we have to do now. So I just want to correct that statement because it was falsely made.
no, I don't disagree with what you're saying, but the grant says March 1st in there. So
It's a
that's-
non-governmental entity. I mean,
Or entity right past that. The next verbiage
They
right
wrote the
past
grant in a
that.
way that maybe isn't clear for a lot of things, so.
If you look, it says non-governmental agency
Well, that's easy to figure
or
out, Mr.
entity
Chairman,
right
that's
past
two ways.
there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Which
Which
means
one
everybody
of the
outside the state or entity.
Alright, if we've gotten everything resolved, all in favor of moving it forward to the commission as is, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Alright, passed unanimously, it'll be on the commission for February. And hopefully we'll have some answers by then. Alright.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Moving on, education for grants and amendments. Entertain a motion to group and approve.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Appropriations, these are, first one sheriff's. Gonna be,
So moved.
Okay, yeah, if
All right.
you need pictures, we've got,
Staff approve it.
these are the things being made from parts they're finding in the jail.
All right.
We need stab-proof vests.
David for 1, 2.
No, I mean, you'd like.
1 and 2, 1 and 2, 4,
All right, we can group and approve
Or
1,
flow.
2,
and
4,
4. Just do it, just 4.
and 4 as pass-through funds.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And that's a one-time reading, passes. And then for number 3, information technology.
Number 3 is a discussion point. Anytime that any department, and for instance, they may buy maintenance or service, and it's cheaper to buy, but we pay it up front. Anytime we do that, we have to put a prepayment on our book and expense it in the year where we actually receive benefit. So what we're doing is promise to pay in the future. Because that's somewhat questionable because we're promising future appropriations, I'm just bringing them to the committee at this point. So anytime we run into those from now on, we'll bring them to the committee to make sure everybody understands. Because at the end of the year, we end up with substantial money.
Do you want a motion on those?
Well, think about it this way, we pay cash and we're gonna expense it next
We're just
year.
putting in the minutes.
We're just putting in the minutes.
And look, and if you guys object to it, then we'll tell them to.
All right, so everybody's good on number
Yeah.
3 and 5.
Number 5 is we had some money for the Greenway. The appropriation was dying because the Greenways are stopped. We've ran into, and Mr. Holt will talk about it, but that's where the funding's coming from, about the money needed for the engineering for the self-enclosed Liberty Creek Park.
Yep, and this is one, just to clarify for everybody, it's a park that's within the grounds of the new school that's being built. There's a grant that we get to tap into for the state. One of the requirements is that we have a census of any property we've got in the county right now, all greenways, everything else. And then if we do that, they're willing to give us $1 million. So.
We're asking to take that.
Or 500,000, I'm sorry.
We're asking to adjust an appropriation for 100,000 from one to the other, but it'll
Yeah,
require on the floor.
it's money they already have, it's already money that's sitting there, we're just saying.
And, Mr. Chairman, this money is matched by, this time, for sure, non-taxpayer money.
Right, this is the money that
This
we
came
left
from
by
the
Mr.
state of the
Brown.
Brown Trust.
All in favor?
Second.
I'm sorry, did I have a second on that?
Yeah.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed unanimously for one reading.
This guy, Sam,
Transfers,
Nothing out of the ordinary. It would really require special.
all right, group and approve, 1 and 2. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, tax refunds, anything Tracy, you spend them?
Nope.
All right, group and
Motion to
approve,
approve.
1 through 5.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, any discussion? All right, that's it, we're good.
Motion to adjourn.
Go. All right.
Alrighty.
No, I thought the vote was pretty quick. Go ahead, we started with.
Hey, I'll be there, but I'll be late
Thanks.
tomorrow.
Okay. You did good. It's Wednesday.
Oh, is it Wednesday?
Here you go. That's close to work. Look.
Oh my gosh.
That's a good way to do it.